right, so this is the Remix Austin meetup. I'm Mark, your MC for tonight. All right, so we have a few announcements. These have happened over the last couple months, but in case some of you missed them, React Server components are now available for preview. Very unstable, but you can go and test those out and see how those work with React Router. There's a new React Router governance model. It's an open governance model. There are details about that up in the repo and how that will be going forward, as well as a blog post by Brooks. And then Remix version 3 is in the works. There's also a blog post about that up on the Remix website, I believe, yeah. So exciting stuff happening in the Remix and React Router world. All right, and now Jake is going to tell us a little bit about forms with React Router. Give it up for Jake.
Hello, hello. Testing. All right, we're good. Okay, my name is Jake Ruesink. I co-founded an agency called Lambda Curry about 6 years ago with my friend Derek. And before that, I started at GSD&M here in Austin on 6th Street. Went through kind of the agency world through Razorfish, and ended up at working with like Citibank and some other large clients. I got to work at Deloitte on the Texas by Texas app. So I don't know if any of y'all have renewed your driver's license recently. But that new interface is something that I got to work on with one of my coworkers, Jared. And so as part of that journey, as you can imagine, there's been a lot of forms, whether it's like you're filling out a credit card or you're filling out your driver license. So I've been doing forms for probably about 12 years. All the way from, I don't know, jQuery mobile, all sorts of old form libraries. So what I wanted to show off is kind of our modern approach to how we handle forms at Lambda Curry. And a lot of this is standing on the shoulders of giants, using things like Remix hook form. This is a Remix meetup, and we love Remix. And so I don't know when they're going to change the name to React Router 7 forms, but using Remix hook form for state management, the Radix UI, which people were talking about that earlier, utilizing ShadCN and those components just to make it easier to build off of. Zod schema for validation, and obviously TypeScript. So forms are obviously very difficult. Has anyone here built a form in Angular before? Like Angular 2, like early on? Those were some wild forms back in the day. But I mean, there's just like a million different ways to solve these problems. And oftentimes you're just trying to figure out validation rules or trying to get things to work. And so it can be pretty complicated, especially if you're trying to layer on state management, all sorts of things. And performance can also be a problem. If you're typing in, I don't know if anyone's ever typed in a form and you're like wondering why it's not doing anything and it's like trying to load. That's probably because they have some sort of state management. Formic was a really popular one for a while, but if you tried to do complicated form in that, it'd start to get slow. And so having these new modern approaches, especially on top of React Router, has really improved all of that. And so I'm going to kind of skip through and try to show you all how we approach it. So we kind of have this like dual layer architecture, and I set that up because I want to not only be able to build forms with React Router, but I'd love to be able to also build forms for other libraries if needed. And so I've kind of separated the layers to where you have your UI, and then you also have the Remix hook form layer on top of that. So we can walk through that in a little bit. But separation of concerns, like I mentioned, Radix is obviously great for the core bits. And then yeah, this is kind of a visual of it. So what we're doing when we're wrapping out our inputs, there's a lot of different pieces of a form. And you might look at an input in the website, and you might not think it's that complicated. But you have a label, you have like a description, message, the control item, and then the actual input itself. And so all these things have to work together to get the state managed correctly. And thankfully, that's where like ShadCN has all these hooks and things to make it easy. So we basically are just using that and then making a layer on top of it that will control it. I've also built in some cool things like you can have prefixes and suffixes to the input if you're into like the front end side of it, so we can check out those. You can have custom errors and things like that, focus ring management. And then one of my goals always when I'm trying to build out a form library is how can I make it as easy as possible to implement? So at the end of the day, it's just the text field and you can have your like simple props. And like, here's an example with like a more complete form. So with the remix form provider, and then you have your fetcher, all of this is very, like, it looks pretty simple. It looks easy to build a form, and that's the goal. And under the hood, there's a lot of complexity to get it to be simple. And so when you're building out your libraries and your apps, ideally, like an end goal would be to be able to build something easily and quickly and simple, and kind of abstract away the complexities of all the state management. If you haven't worked with Zod before, it's just a great way to kind of manage your data and make sure it matches a correct shape. And so it's also really helpful for form management because that's basically essentially what you're doing at the end of the day. But you can also, with the cool thing about Remix hook form is that you can layer on top the server side and like validate on the server too. And so if you are doing a round trip and you need to be like, hey, that password's not good, you can inject those errors pretty easily. And so that's the great thing of using the Remix hook form wrapper. And then I've built in a way that you can like pass in custom components. That's not that important, but it's pretty cool. I'll show some examples. And then as like a fun thing, I vibe coded this cool data table filter that I can show off. I don't know if y'all saw it on Twitter a while ago, but it's called Baza UI, and they had a really cool like data filter. So I wanted to try to implement that with what we've got, so I did that. And then also, who uses Storybook at their job? Early on, Storybook got really like bloated, and it was like kind of clunky to work with. But they've been doing a really good job, and so if you haven't picked it up in a while, I'd recommend trying it again. And now it's like fast and fun to work with, and I can show off an example. Also, React Router comes with a really great stubbing library, I guess, or like method here. And so you can utilize that within your stories and have like a mock React Router. And so that's how I'm able to test all my components. And so yeah, at the end of the day, like we're trying to make this like really lean, tree shakeable, you get what you need type of architecture. And I'll, ESLint, or we use Biome actually, so I don't know where I got that from, but the key kind of advantages, like I talked about earlier, are like you want to be able to just import this and then get started building a form right away and not have to worry about the complexities of the state and the errors. It just kind of does it all for you. I'm going to skip through these. This was, I have to admit, a vibe-coded presentation, and we'll talk about that later. My goal for the day is to get through this presentation, and then we can talk more about kind of the AI stuff. But I wanted to show you all kind of what we're doing, because I know everyone who is a developer probably has touched a form before, and so I'd love to get more people involved with like this ecosystem. So I want to, yeah, it just added so much. I want to showcase this guy here. Oh, of course it's not going to. GitHub tears down my server real quickly. I'm trying to use GitHub pages to showcase it. So this is our storybook. In Storybook, you can have markdown pages, and then all of these guys. So these are the form inputs that I've started with. So you have like a calendar with these drop-down selects, check boxes, data tables. Like this is my original data table that I made. A date picker with popovers so that you can have little modals for things. And the cool thing about Storybook now is you have these tests. And so these guys kind of run through interactions that you've set up, and it's very similar to like what you're doing with Playwright. And you can have it select elements and take actions. And so as I'm building this out, I can kind of define all of these tests so that I can make sure my forms will be working as I expect them to in the inputs I'm building. So like OTP input, just make sure you can type your input code and submit. And all of that's using the React Router mock server under the hood. And then, yeah, the vibe coded like beast here is like a full data table with, and this one's pretty interesting because it's all driven on the, or the server side one is all driven from the server, so it's using query parameters. So these are basically changing the URL, and then the URL drives what data comes from React Router to then populate the data table. And so it's kind of like a form-driven responsive data table. It's pretty cool. And this is, yeah, like I mentioned, the Baza UI filters, like pretty clean. The inspiration was linear, so I'm trying to have like some pretty cool linear-esque filters for a data table. So yeah, all of this is open source too. So like if you're working on a new app or whatever, and you want to use React Router, I'd love to work with you on setting up this form library and getting help on it. It should be really easy. It's all like Shadcyan under the hood and copy components over, or just use it from there. Let's see. I'll show a little bit of the code. We can see the presentation too in here. So much stuff on my screen though. So this is an example. So I don't know if you've written a presentation in code before. This was actually my first time. I usually do it in Canva. But my co-founder Derek found this. It's called MARP. So I think that just stands for Markdown Presentation. And I'll talk about some other workflows too, but I essentially like had it create this whole Markdown file, and then somebody wrote a way to turn those into the slides that you saw. So that's kind of an interesting way to create a presentation. So one thing I wanted to show off is like this React Router stub here. Can you all see that okay? Let me get rid of my sidebars. So it's pretty straightforward. Basically, what you're doing is having a way to pass in like paths and data you can get. So it's like not too much of a wrapper here. I'm just basically initializing a root path, and then we can showcase. Let's see. Let's look at a test here. So, where am I? Storybook. Where are my tests here? Okay, so let's look at the this guy. So the implementation is, if you're familiar with Storybook, they have like decorators that you can wrap your stories with. It's very Storybook specific, but this stub decorator wraps my whole page with the routes here, and I can basically just tell it the path, what component I want it to load, and then the action here. And if you're familiar with React Router 7 or Remix, that's just an action for React Router. And so all it's doing is handling my form submission here. It's validating my form schema based off of my Zod schema that we talked about. And if there's errors, it's returning the errors. Otherwise, it's saying form submitted successfully. So if we go back and we look at our checkbox stories here, you can see if I submit, it has some that are required, and so it's popping up errors. And then if I mark the ones that are required, it says form submitted successfully. And then I talked about how you can have like customized components here. So if you want to override like your checkbox and pass in like your own version of it, you can have like different stylings. This is kind of an ugly example, but I wanted to showcase that too. So cool. That's really all I got for forms. Does anybody? I'll open up for questions. We can talk about it for a little bit, and then we can go on to phase 2. Yeah, go ahead.
You're talking about using Storybook as a test runner. I've heard about that. Are you running your Storybook tests in CI right now?
Yes, I am.
You are.
Yeah.
Have you experienced any? I learned that in Storybook 9, that just got
This is Storybook 9. Yeah.
Storybook 9.
Yes.
They teamed up with V-Test. I haven't actually seen that in action yet. I would love if you could show us what the running this like.
I'm pretty sure I can just do it. I mean, when I hit that, so okay, I'll dive a little bit deeper into that. So if we look at the code again too, it's this play. Yeah, if you listen to Syntax FM, you would have heard them talk about this also. This is Storybook 9. This is, yeah, the latest cutting edge stuff. I'm trying to always keep ahead of the trends, so keep up. No. But this is the play function here. So I think they might change it a little bit to where you can have different versions, but they did implement this like step feature. So you can actually have different steps that you're having within your play function. And it is, I think, just a V-test or some sort of flavor of that under the hood. And then you can run those events and expect things very similar to how you would be writing tests typically. And then here, it basically creates another story, I guess, or another, I don't know what you call them, another view. And it runs those interactions immediately when it loads. So you can kind of see that in real time here. They also have a plugin, I think, that you can use to like click through and write kind of those in real time. I have not played around with that, but that seems like a cool way to do it. And then like, I don't know, it's been a while. I think I just run these. And because I have it running, it'll build, yeah, I don't know. So I got a few steps here, but I should just run it in like in the background. I think that's still just building. So yeah, it's opening up a headless browser here and running through them all. Okay, there we go. Good question. Yeah, this is Storybook 9. Go for it. I don't want to move too fast because I want to. Yeah.
Just kind of going back to the
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's using React Router. So when I think there's a few ways you can set it up, but right now in React Router, when you change the URL, I have it to where I think it just re-gets the data. And so it's driving the URL change when I do the filters, and then React Router is actually doing the hard work of getting the data for me.
Right. I was asking if that was actually being done from the level of the actual data table, where like the data table is technically not using JavaScript to update the URL.
I believe it is using JavaScript. It's not, if you turned off JavaScript, I bet you it would not work. I'm not, I know some people like to do that. I think everyone has JavaScript enabled. So I'm not going to go that deep. But I think if you can, there's like a way to open this in the new place somewhere so that you could like see it. I don't know how. Well, I need it to be in its own like window. Anyway, if you could see it in its own window, you could see the URL happening, and that's all done. It's pretty cool. So like, so in here, let's see. Let's look for our data table, and then our server. So many files. So where's the server one? Server driven. So you can see, yeah, handle data fetch here. So it's going to go through and it's going to look for, and this is all like the React router stub. So in theory, this would be your React router loader. And it's going to, this would be your database or whatever, handling those query params and then passing back the right data for the table. So this is all like, you know, AI encoded mock data, but you could imagine that going to a real database and then returning. Yeah? Great questions. So the question, if I understand it correctly, is why would we use remix hook form instead of just React hook form? Mm-hmm. So it was a, here we go. These guys here, oh, they updated it too. So Forge42 is an agency ran by Artem. I don't know if you'll follow him on Twitter, but you should. I think he just joined the Epic Web community under Kent C. Dodds. And Artem, big bird guy, telling me like his parrots, but he and his agency built this wrapper. And I think essentially all it does is give a few easier ways to work with the React router loaders and actions so that you don't have to manually do it that way. I wish I had a better answer because I'm not like, I didn't dive too deeply into how it works. But it's basically just a drop-in replacement. So instead of using React hook form, I can use remix hook form, and it manages some of that under the hood for me. But I couldn't tell you how it works because I did not dive that deep. But it works well. But yeah, and all of the ways that you would be working with that library is the same as React hook form. Yeah, good question. But no, Artem's great. So look him up. Look up Forge42 and him and his co-founder. And I think they're making a video on React Router 7 here pretty soon on the Epic Web.
Another small question about your storybook. You mentioned the storybook decorators. I've used decorators before. I'm familiar with the idea. I haven't used remix as much inside of storybook. Will you show me a little bit more about how that is enabling you to? It seems like it enables you to use remix forms, remix actions from within your stories. Is that accurate?
Yes. Oh no, it was not necessarily fun to set up, but I think I have since simplified it. But the idea is that you can use the stub and pass in a loader or an action, and you can have different paths. So you could, in theory, have like a whole app example within a story. And I don't know, what else do you want to know about that? Like, it really is just like a drop-in for like, if you're familiar working with the React router, or like I guess the original Remix, you had that loader that was the like basically the data that you get when the page loads, and then you have your action, which would be like a form submission to that returns the action data. And so those are just like drop-in replacements for the stub. And so then when you're within that story, let's see, let me go to a simpler example. So if you're within that story and you're setting up your form here, you basically just do handle submit to your fetcher. And the fetcher here goes to an action with path slash. So this is how you would set up your Remix hook form, very similar to React hook form. So when I submit my form, it's going to go to slash with a method of post, which then would go to my stub and hit this action. So
Where are you importing that decorator from? Is that a storybook function?
this is one that like
you wrote it.
I created, but at the end of the day, basically, it is from React router, create route stub.
Got it.
This was just like a helper to help me, I don't know, I probably could even simplify this more, but it helped me wrap my story, essentially, with the decorator pattern.
That is a really desirable pattern. Really.
Yeah, thanks. And this is like, you can steal it. Yeah, it's all open source. So you can copy this into your project and start using these if you use Storybook with your work or for fun. And keep going, my battery's still alive. I'm gonna go to things that I think, I don't know, personally I think a little less boring. I've been doing forums too long in my life. But we had a company summit, Lambda Curry. We have about 14 people now, and we brought 12 of them all to Austin a few weeks ago. And one of the things that I wanted to do as a company is try to encourage everyone to explore the AI side of things. And the first day of the summit, we did a promptathon. And I didn't know how it was going to go. I was a little nervous about it. I wanted to encourage everyone to only use, like, to not actually code anything. So I wanted them to only use some sort of AI agent or AI tool and only talk to it in plain English and then try to build something out of it. And what's interesting about this is that after about 2 hours, we were done coding and did our presentations. The people who ended up winning the competition were our non-technical folks, because they didn't have this kind of blocker of like knowing what could be done, and so they were kind of more brave, I guess, about exploring what they could do, and ended up getting more done than the people that were actually, like, our most technical person probably got the least done, Derek. And we all voted for each other's, and he didn't score very high. So that was kind of a fun experience, seeing the non-technical folks like actually like compete and build something cool. And so as part of that, I was researching ways that you can think about getting, I know like prompt engineering, that's like a big loaded term. And now people are talking about like getting your context is even more important. And so we can talk about that here in a little bit. We do have a special guest from a secret that I'm going to share with y'all. But how do I present this? Moving to a non-vibe coded presentation here. Okay. So these are like 10 or 9 slides that I think about when I'm wanting to create a good prompt. So like start with the outcome in mind. Oh, what is your end goal? I think as technical folks, we have an advantage if you have 17 years of experience in front end or if you have a little bit of experience, that the new people won't, because they won't even know what the AI is writing the code. And so knowing what you expect the code to look like, I think, is an advantage still, and why we should all still have our jobs here in 5 years, hopefully. But it also helps you know how you want to position your prompt. So plan it out, and the clear is better than clever. I know there's like a lot of emotion, like, hey, if you don't do this right, I'm gonna lose my job or whatever. Like, you don't need to necessarily be emotional with the prompting. Maybe CodeGen does under the hood, I don't know. But being clear with it is better than being clever. So, and then, yeah, context plus constraints. I think a lot of people don't always realize how much context is helpful. As humans, we always talk about, like, yeah, maybe we should do this, or you should do this like this. But with AI, giving it really clear examples and like really direct information about what you want the outcome will help guide it. Especially if you're doing structured, if you want a structured response, make sure you're giving it either a Zod schema is helpful, or like clear instructions. So adding context and then also giving it constraints for what you want. Think step by step. So it's kind of weird to think about telling other people how to think about things. It's kind of almost taboo. Don't tell me how to think about that. But with AI, you can. And one of the most common ones is telling it, like, think step by step, like, reason through this logically. There's other ways that you can tell it to think about things, like, be creative about this, or you can kind of describe how you want the AI to think, and it'll try to do that. And so that actually is a really good way to help cut surprises. And then, yeah, telling it to think logically will help it think about math better. But that's not the only thing. Like, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know the ways to think about things necessarily, but you can try to guide it. Show and tell, like obviously giving examples of like formatting and output that you want will help it be better at doing that. That's should be an obvious one. Structured output, we talked about that. You can, when you're working in multi-agentic workflows, there'll be times that you might want a JSON response back that's really helpful. Role play personas. So something that I don't often do myself, but if I'm trying to do something like build a presentation, it might be helpful to be like you're an expert in this subject, and like go make a presentation about it. It's more important for like copy and content maybe than coding. I think most, like Cursor probably has you're a developer expert built in, so you probably don't need to tell it that every time. But if you're working with like ChatGPT and you want to come up with some content, you can just tell it what you think it should be like. And then finally, like, just try things and like iterate. It's relatively cheap right now. If you're paying for a subscription, it's cheaper than you probably think. And then you can always just, if you don't like the outcome, just delete it and try again. And like adjust things as you go, and you can kind of start to learn the personalities of the different models. And that's kind of tricky too. Like, Cloud's different than ChatGPT is different than Grok. So learning those will be as interesting. And then figuring out like your workflows for your work. So like product owners, I think, are going to be the future of the world if they can start to connect all of these dots together. It's like you're going to start prototyping things in one tool and then like taking that into some other tools. So there's going to be a lot of different workflows, and so that's kind of one thing I want to open up to the floor and hear kind of how people are doing here in a second, ways that they've enjoyed doing various workflows, and there's just so many of them right now that it's a wild time, and there's more every day, so it's interesting. And I'll kind of showcase some here in a little bit. And then, I always would recommend that you have a human validate still. before you push it. I mean, maybe there's a time where it's like a really simple change and you trust that it's only going to do that, but you should probably look at the code or the outcome and polish it up before you just blind merge something. But anyway, that's a silly one. Okay, but this, so this is something I built in ChatGPT. If you use ChatGPT, you can get a copy of this. But what it does is it has a way for you to iterate on your prompts. And so it'll tell you kind of the weaknesses of your prompt, give you a version of your prompt that it thinks is better, and then continue to ask you some follow-up questions for ways that you can do this. We had a developer at our company who really took this to heart, and he iterated on a prompt for, he said, 45 minutes. I was like, what? There's no way I'd ever do that. But he wanted everything to be perfect about it, and he was about to kickstart this like huge project. And so he took that prompt, and he actually took it into an app I'm about to talk about called CodeGen. And he claims he got like 80% done. Like this was going to be a few-week project. He thinks he got 80% done in like an hour that way. I don't think so, but pretty cool use case for like really crafting your prompt and your plan. It's really like helping you plan and think ahead before you get started on something. So I thought that was interesting. Okay, so let's talk about a few different workflows, and then I'll open it up to hear other people's. But one of the tools that we've been really implementing, because we use Slack, we use Linear in our work. I was looking for tools out there that would be great with that, and I found one called CodeGen. And if you have more questions about this, Jesus actually just quit CodeGen, but he probably knows way more than I do from the inside. But he's here from California, just moved back to Texas, and yeah, came out to support me. We were friends talking on their Slack, and he was like, yeah, come say hi. So this is CodeGen, and it has some really cool integrations. Hopefully I don't share any of my work secrets here. But you can see it integrates with GitHub, so it has like a GitHub agent that you can chat with in there, and it'll iterate on the pull requests. Slack, I can talk with it in Slack, and then it'll do things for me. And so I can do things like start in Slack, and I can create linear tickets, and then go to linear, and it has an agent in there, and I can do the work in there, and it'll create a pull request, and then I can review that pull request in GitHub. If you are an agency that uses Figma, you can take the designs and give those links and have it get that context in there. And Notion, Sentry, can you just add a Sentry? I need to add that. So that's a really great tool. I think it's $100 for an individual account, which seems expensive, but is all you can eat Cloud 4 usage, which is crazy. So you can run that sucker up. And $200, even bigger deal for teams, which is, I think, the best deal for a team right now. If you are like a small company, $200, all you can use for your entire team in Slack, which is crazy. So we've been using that quite a bit. Let's see, I don't know, not that much. We should use it more, but pretty cool. Another workflow that I think is really cool, other than like just using cursor to code, cursor background agents, pretty cool, but that's pretty understandable. It just like is basically going through a task. One thing that I want to explore more is this tool called Repo Prompt. And this is just by an indie dev. He made this tool because he wanted to solve this problem. But you can load in your workspace here. And you can put in a prompt. So I can use my prompt agent. You can put in a prompt here. And you can start to add things to the context. And so if you want to get a huge context window for like Gemini 2.5 that can have like 1 million, maybe soon 2 million tokens. But right now, I think the recommended use case is to go to O3 Pro, and which I think, I don't know, 125,000 tokens. Anyway, you can add a bunch of files, get all that context set up. If you have a hard problem you're trying to solve, take it to O3 Pro and hit send, and it'll go do research and think about things, and then return an XML like diff structure that you can paste back here and make the updates in your code base. And so I think this is really powerful if you're trying to do something kind of more complex that you're wanting to knock out. And like, I don't know, using an O3 Pro. So that's something that I want to do and try out more. So yeah, those are like 2 things that I think are pretty novel and new. I wanted to hear from the crowd and see, does anybody else have some cool workflows? I know somebody was talking about cloud CLI. Those are ones that I have not explored yet. So, oh, yeah.
I'm curious about CodeGen. The extensions that you showed, are those more than MCP servers, or is that the primary that it is?
I don't know, do you use MCP servers in there? They're direct integrations, I think.
Because I have used the linear MCP. Linear has their own MCP server that if you have an MCP client, Cursor is an MCP client. You can manage your linear stuff from any MCP.
Yes, Linear specifically they have their own agentic SDK now, and CodeGen is an agent within that SDK, like pretty new stuff, but they were like part of that partnership. And so they were in from the ground trying to help them design that. And so anyone can build a linear agent now, but CodeGen was one of the first, helped them build it. And so they're very tightly integrated. Yeah, that's a cool one.
Have you heard of Goose before?
Oh, yes. Codename Goose here, this guy.
I work for Block, full disclosure.
Oh, cool.
But it's an open source MCP client, so you can do all of this stuff, and it's free, and it runs locally. You have to pay for your token value.
So Kinsey Dodds gave us a shout out. Somebody was asking him on Twitter if there were any open source MCP clients out there, and so y'all got the shout out. Very cool. Anyone else have workflows and cool things they want to show off? Someone was talking about their cloud CLI behavior earlier. That's something I need to play around with more. Is I've not gotten into those CLI editors, but pretty cool. Yeah.
I use Cursor for like greenfield projects, but I was wondering if you could give some insight on your experience in like using it with like large scale projects, because I've heard people say like the larger the project is, maybe with distributed repos and things of that nature, it starts not working as good as, or is not as optimal as it should be.
Yeah, so we got some pretty large projects in our company. Mono repos, those type of things. I think that's getting better every day. Like they're building great tools. They have really good grepping tools so that the AI can like find files and code across the whole repo. So I think that'll start to get better. The challenge is going to be your context building. So the way that I like to approach those kind of problems, especially if I don't know where I'm headed in those large repos, is to start with Gemini 2.5 that has a larger context window in the ask mode. And when I'm doing that, I'm just, I can ask it questions. I don't have to be super perfect, but I'm trying to figure out and trying to learn about where things happen. And this is actually a really cool way to, like, if you're working with a library that is open source, that you're maybe not familiar with, pull that library code down, index it in Cursor, and then you can have that open with your other project and have Gemini 2.5 asking questions in the library repo. So you basically are like, get your own AI agent that knows everything about that repo, and you can ask it, like, how would it do something, and then take that into your other organization repo to like implement for that library. So that's kind of a cool like hack that I've been able to do with some things that might not be super well documented or whatever. Just like actually get the source code and start to learn from it. So the ask and research phase and starting to build up your context. And then also dragging in files. You can even have it come up with like its own game plan for what you're wanting to accomplish in a markdown file. And then making sure it has all of the right files in the context before you kick off that agent is always helpful. Because I guess a lot of people will just start typing and hope the agent can find those things. But if you already know where you want it to go, because you've done that research ahead of time, that'll just guide it even better. So building up those context windows are super helpful.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
To add on to that, because I work in a large repository with AI a lot. The thing that we have done that has proved to be pretty successful so far, but we're still definitely experimenting with it, is building our own MCP server that exposes the documentation and the methods that are inside the repository, just to make it more discoverable for the agents to find. You have to have an MCP agent client that is doing that legwork still, but it makes it a lot easier to stitch these things together.
To add on to that, because Cursor is a MCP agent, so if you haven't played around with, what's it called, browser agent? This guy. It's a lot of fun. You should try it. So get this extension. I disabled it because I thought I was breaking something earlier, but it wasn't that extension. But I need to re-enable this extension. You can click on that extension and hit connect, and it, after you've added it to your either cloud or Cursor MCP, and it will have tools. So like as you're actively developing, it has tools to where it can control the browser, so it can actually like take actions on the browser, which that's kind of fun. Like I don't know if you wanted to have it fill out a form for you or whatever. But the superpower, I think, is it can take a screenshot and it can also get the console logs. And so as you're actively developing, say you're building a, I don't know, some landing page and you want it to look cool, you can, or you're running into some error in the console logs, it's a faster way to get that tighter feedback loop. So as you're working with agents, having a tight feedback loop is really helpful. And so I don't know if anyone was here when we did that, the last little mini hackathon night. I turned on Gemini 2.5 Pro Max on Cursor, and I had this browser agent running, so it knew when it was running into these errors and was able to fix it. And I spent a whole, I think, $7.50 in 45 minutes, but that's fun.
Have you seen Playwright?
Yeah, so let's show that one too.
Does that do the same thing as this?
I don't know if it can get the console logs. Maybe it can. I have not played with it, but this is what, so Playwright is basically what's doing all those tests under the hood that on the form library I was showing. So they have their own MCP, so you can control browsers essentially. So moving towards a world where the browser is, you know, buying your plane tickets for you or whatever. I don't know. We might even skip that step to, I have not played around with the agent-to-agent stuff yet. But that's the future too. But yeah, the MCP stuff is a lot of fun. There's a lot of cool things. If you're wanting to build something pretty, what's that site called? with the modern front-end components. Putting it all on the
Chatzian.
spot. Not Shatsian. It's like where you would be building like a landing page and it has a bunch of like different sections. Nope.
Tailwind UI?
All right, MCP servers. So, okay, let's skip to this one for a second too. I have not played around with this one either, but if you're wanting to get the latest documentation, you can on something. One way to do it is you can go to the site and have Cursor index it, which is super powerful. I think you should do that if you're working with certain libraries. But also, this context 7 MCP has a way to enable your agent to go get the latest, like I think they do have their own index of documentation that they update daily. And so it's a great way to allow your agent to go get the latest documentation. So if you enable this one in Cursor, it'll always be using whatever latest version, which is helpful because sometimes the AI agents like have this underlying knowledge of something that's outdated and won't do it the latest way. This is where, like, Cursor rules are also helpful. But anyway,
I have a flow I can share.
yeah, do it.
So recently, since Codex for Web came out, I think I found my perfect flow for working on personal projects. And you'll probably hate it, but it starts with user stories. And I write a bunch of really detailed user stories with the help of the robot. And I put those into GitHub issues. And then I go to Codex here, and I pick my repo, and I basically paste the user story in there. And I plan with the robot about how to split up the user stories and ways that they can be worked on in groups in parallel. And so then you can give it 5 user stories and have it work on all 5 at a time, as long as you've planned that they won't really touch each other. And then from there, because it's not perfect, you'll probably end up pulling down. Each of those happen as a pull request that actually gets put to GitHub. And then I will clone those and use Claude Code to work through those locally. And I love Claude Code because it has a way, like by default, I guess it's system prompt or whatever is really good, but it will build a checklist of things it needs to do every time. And then it has built-in tools to call itself over and over again. And so it will iterate through the checklist that it built based on what you told you need it to do. So those 2 things in concert, I think, have worked really well for me.
Yeah, super cool. That's an example of you can use different tools together. And it's just going to get better. Cursor just added a task list, I believe, today. Cool. Any other questions or stories people want to share? Otherwise, yeah, all right. No, that's great.
We're using Goose internally to run, just like Mark was describing, starting from a GitHub issue. The GitHub issue prompt or text is the prompt for Goose, and then if you tag in our Goose bot, that is an internal thing in our organization, it'll spin off a build kite step that actually just goes and tries to run the AI agent to like execute the thing that you asked it to do, and then it'll put up a PR without even having to do anything, which is a really neat workflow. I'm curious if anyone else besides Mark, I guess, is doing that to like automate the prompt to PR step. I haven't heard that much.
I mean, Cogent, that's somewhere. Take it away, Jesus. We're not hearing that.
So something that Cogent can do is it accepts videos. So let's say like your user has a bug, and let's say you use posthoc to record a video, you can just attach that via Slack message to the agent, and the agent will use Gemini to parse the video, get like a feel for what's going on, and then put up a PR. And you can also tag CodeGen on like GitHub comments and GitHub issues and stuff. So yeah, and a workflow that I like to use, or that I used a lot, was to make a linear ticket using CodeGen in Slack, and I would kind of have it do a lot of research for me on a particular project, and then I would kind of iterate with it back and forth until we arrived at a spec that made sense, and then I would assign CodeGen to the linear issue in linear, and then I would generate a PR.
Yeah, so I think what we're learning here is definitely like, if you spend a few steps early on to like research and then figure out the game plan and then kick off the agent, that's better than just like trying to kick off the agent. Obviously, it depends on how big your tasks are, but if they're gonna require extensive GitHub issues, then yeah, very cool. I did not know I could just attach videos now. That's cool. We got this place till 9.
All right. Thank you, Jake. Everybody give it up for Jake. Okay. So if you want to give a talk sometime, please do that. These are some ideas of things you could give talks about. There's the new Vite environment API, which enables the Cloudflare plugin and some of the cool React Server component stuff. New middleware, which is on its way to being stable. So yeah. We are also working on the website for Remix Austin. Recently revitalized, and there's several user stories up in our GitHub for that of different tasks that need to be worked on. We've got some wireframes in Figma, and of course we have an existing website that is the one we're revamping. So take a look at that in GitHub and help us out if you want to get some hands-on experience with React Router 7. And the next meetup will be August 6th, next month, first Wednesday of every month. All right. Thank you all for coming. We do have 30 more minutes, so feel free to socialize and hang out.